All right. Hello, I'm Benvenutti with Dylan Graham. We're contracting officers at the NASA Shared Services Center, or the NSSC, which supports the NASA SBIR, STTR program. We're going to cover we're going to cover the budget part of the proposal and try to cover the major cost categories and items that we'll request you to submit. So, I'd like to begin with some of the drivers of the contracting officer. Why are we looking at your budget detail? The Federal Acquisition Regulations, or the FAR, requires the contracting officer to be responsible for the ensuring performance of all necessary actions for effective contracting. They also require us to make sure you comply with all the contract terms and safeguard the interest of the United States in all its contractual relationships. Basically, that means we have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. Our money, your money, everybody's money. So that's why we're looking. And to do this, we have to comply with federal regulations and guidance. Mentioned one regulation is the FAR. FAR Part 15 also requires that contracting officers make sure that all costs are reasonable. What would a prudent person pay for similar items or services? Make sure that all the proposed costs are allocable, that all these items and services are needed for the performance of this particular contract, not any others, but this one, and that all costs are allowable, meaning all the costs are permitted by federal regulations. We also have to comply with the NASA FAR supplement, NASA policy, and procurement guidance, and also, as Kate mentioned, the SBA policy directive. So I'm going to start with an overview of the key items in what we're asking you to submit. We'll start with direct labor, looking for names of employees, all the employees, description or position type, the hours that you're estimating they'll perform, and the hourly rate. Also ask for your indirect rates, including fringe, overhead, G&A. These are the typical ones we see, or any combination of these three. And other direct costs, including materials, supplies, equipment, subcontracts, and travel. We'll also ask you to submit a percentage of profit that you'll be taking, and a dollar amount for that profit. And audit information, including, that is if you've been audited by your cognizant agency, and if you have a rate agreement that you've entered into with your cognizant agency. Mentioned hours and an hourly rate for direct labor. Just want you to be cognizant that there's only so many hours in the day, and for a year there's typically 2,080 work hours. So if you are proposing for a phase 1, that's 6 months for NASA SBIRs, then you don't want to cross that threshold of 1,040 hours for any one particular employee. And this is kind of key if you also propose multiple proposals, and if you get selected for multiple contracts and have one employee or a couple of employees that are throughout all of the contracts combined, they shouldn't go over that 1,040, just to be realistic. The direct labor should include, again, all of your firm's employees, most especially your key personnel. Some questionable items I'd like to share, just some that came to mind, that the personnel proposed under direct labor need to be employees of your firm. They shouldn't be subcontractor employees or consultants. That does happen from time to time. Administrative personnel shouldn't be listed under direct labor. Usually they would fall under indirect costs. Sometimes we'll see a PI's the proposed number of hours are really less than the other hours of other employees proposed. And we'll go ahead and question that, because that's your key employer, that's your principal investigator, and we'd like to just get clarification on why he's getting so few hours. For indirect rates, already talked about fringe benefits, overhead, and G&A. I've got a link. If you've got a rate agreement from your cognizant agency, we're going to make sure that your proposed rates comply with that rate agreement. If you do not, we're going to ask you to submit a basis of computation. How did you come up with that 30% G&A, or how did you come up with that proposed overhead? If you've never done that before, or if you're having trouble with it, I provided a link. It's a DCAA link, and it provides tools for helping you compute your indirect rates. Okay, so we've covered direct rates, and we've covered other indirect rates, so that leaves other direct cost. Start with equipment. Generally, the program has the expectation that you'll have all the resources needed to complete your proposed work. Sometimes there may be some circumstances where you'll be needed to buy the equipment. We would need a justification for that and a basis of estimate, either a quote from a current company or documentation of prior purchases or even market research. That'll be the same with materials and supplies as well. Any purchase of equipment along with materials and supplies needs to be from a domestic company. If not, we're going to ask for a written justification on why you need a foreign vendor, and the contracting officer is going to have to actually provide written approval for that foreign vendor. One reason could be that, hey, this foreign vendor is the only one who supplies this particular product. So we're going to ask for some detail on the materials and supplies. You don't want to just say $5K for supplies. You're just going to, ask for a list, and again, the estimated cost and basis of estimate for those. Again, could be quotes, could be market research or prior purchases. So subcontracts and consultants are also other direct costs. For subcontracts, we'll need a statement of work and a detailed budget that mirrors the format that we're asking the small business to provide. If they don't want to provide you certain aspects of the budget, like their indirect rates, you can get with the contracting officer and give him permission to go directly to your proposed subcontractor, and he or she can get those rates. For consultants, we're looking mainly just for a purpose or a brief statement of work, but we don't need a full-blown budget. We'll just need proposed hours and an hourly rate. Just want you to be mindful of the thresholds, and this is from the SBA policy directive for they give out certain thresholds that you can subcontract out. For phase ones, that'll be 33%, with the firm required to at least complete 67% of the work. For STTR's phase ones, that would be 30% would be the threshold for subcontracts, 30% for research institutions, and the remaining 40% for the firm. And this is an example of other direct of figuring out or computing the threshold. This particular example or like examples are in prior solicitations. Thank you, and in the current, and it'll be in the current solicitation as well. All right, I tried to speed through that just in case you had any questions. And just let me say, if we don't get, if you don't want to ask now or we don't get to answer all the questions, Dylan and myself will be available for the rest of the day and tomorrow as well to answer any of your questions.
Hi, I have two.
Okay.
What's the maximum allowable fee we're allowed, and should we propose travel or not?
So it depends. I'll discuss the travel first. So for phase ones, both SBIRs and STTRs, travel is discouraged. So we're going to have to get approval for travel for the phase one, the phase twos. for phase, or for SBIR phase 1 and STTR phase 1. For phase 2s, you've got a longer period of time, 2 years. And so if you need to like travel and meet with the Corps at the center or meet with your subcontract, you know, we would understand. So maximum allowed fee, we typically, historically, we see an average range of about 5 to 7% fee.
I was reading that you had a de minimis, says 10% you can do without doing the paperwork you were talking about?
That's new, but it only applies to grants. That's in 2 CFR 200 for the grant regulations, right. And NASA's historically we award through contracts, so that doesn't exist for contracts.
Okay. And is that distinct from the fee, or?
Yes, what that is involving is your indirect rates, and fee is profit. Fee is just another name for profit.
Hi, can you talk a little bit to the SBIR data rights clause and what the government has as far as rights versus the company?
I thought I was going to get out of here without that. So, very good question. So basically, the FAR has not caught up with the new SBA policy directive. I don't know how much communication was going on with the SBA and the FAR Council, but we've had to use the current FAR clauses, which are different. They're the historical FAR clauses, as opposed to the new data rights in the new policy directive.